Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus on Greatness podcast. I am your host, Hiram Roche. And as always, it is truly an honor to be here with my Greatness Tribe. This has been a great journey, I promise you, and that I have truly been enjoying. Been able to have some great conversations with you and being able to really kind of like go on this journey of life together. And it's been awesome. It's been great. And so I want to just take some extra time this today or tonight to be able to just say thank you. Thank you for all of you that are listening, that are sharing, that are commenting, that have been supporting and continually being and rocking with me throughout these years. And so I am truly thankful and grateful for it. Always developing, always growing. And so this is kind of like, again, we're going on this journey together and I'm excited about it. So, throughout this month and last month of the month of May, we've been having this conversation talking about this system, right? And one of the things that we have been like really just laying out is understanding that no matter what you look at, everything has been created by a system. The way that we function has been created by a system. The way that you see certain things operate in other people's lives or in businesses or whatever that is, there's a system that has been created to be able to make that thing or that business or that individual function the way that they do. And so, what we have been looking at is we've been really leaning into a system that we have within our own selves. We started off last month talking about the system of our thinking and how really powerful and impactful that is to our life and to the system, specifically when we're talking about the way that we think about ourselves, right? So now we have been in this month, in the month of June. No matter when you are listening to this, this is where we are. We are leaning into this next phase of our system. So your thinking is one part of your system, but the other part of this system is our emotions. And we had a great conversation on last week, which I thought was awesome, where it really started to really lay out some pieces of this system that affects us in more so in this negative connotation or negative way of how we think or see or feel about our own selves. And so I want to continue on with this, which today we're going to be leaning into some more pieces of this context of our emotion. But what I want to explore or lean into or look at is understanding what triggers these negative emotions and how we can be able to cope with them. Last time we talked about having these in reference to the emotional context of having these negative conversations within our minds. But this week I want to really lean into the negative emotions and the things that trigger those things, and really again how to be able to help us with that. So before we dive in any deeper, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I'm going to give us some defining definitions so that we can all be on the same page and platform. Then we can be able to lean into this conversation. So the first thing I want to give is, what is a system? So we can all understand what is a system. A system is a collection of interconnected parts that work together to achieve a common goal. That is what a system is. Now, how does our emotions play in a part of that system? Emotions can play a part in a system as they influence how people interact with the system and how they make decisions. So, our emotions is a part of the system. It plays a part of the system, but it's the part that helps us to interact. It's the thing that kind of influences the decisions that we make. And so then we talked about in this definition, I want to give these definitions so we can all be on the same page with this part, is how does the system of our thinking connect with the system of the emotions? Because again, all of these pieces are a part of the major system that has helped designed or flow or function how we see or think about ourselves and the things that we do. Right. So we need to understand these systems or these defining definitions of how these things play in our system. So the system of thinking and the system of emotions are connected in the brain through various neural pathways. Emotions can influence our thoughts, and our thoughts can influence our emotions. They basically are playing this back and forth piece where normally this part right here is where we have a lot of where things kind of start getting settled in. And we're going to deal with something next month, which I believe is going to kind of start tying all of these pieces together. But when we talk about our thinking, which we dealt with on last month, our thinking starts to feed off of our emotions, and our emotions start playing this back and forth with how we think. So they start playing back and forth, which becomes this cycle of system all by itself that starts to create something that we'll deal with on next month. And so you got to stay with me to be able to see what that's going to be. So this is what, again, we want to be able to lean into and talk about how what is the trigger pieces, what is the things that trigger these negative emotions, or what triggers these negative conversations that we start to have within ourselves. I think we have to start looking and identifying if we are going to interrupt this negative system of emotions of how we see ourselves or how we do certain things. We have to start recognizing what is the thing that triggers when you get negative. What is the trigger? What is the thing that triggers that negative emotion within ourselves? So the first thing we have to do is, for us to be able to do that, we have to recognize the triggers. So so I know for me, as always, we're going to have some honest dialogue, or some vulnerable dialogue. I'll use that word, because we're already being honest, but some vulnerable dialogue where right now I'm in the midst of preparing for something, right, coming up this week. And as I'm preparing for it, it's actually a men's conference that's happening at my church. And so while I'm preparing for this, there are different things that I have been experiencing in reference to triggers that have been triggering these negative emotions. Now, some emotions that I'm feeling through this process are good emotions. Some of it is me missing my uncle, missing certain pieces that a relationship was and has been for me. So some of those are positives, right? Those are natural positive emotions. But what has also came with some of that is some other things, like we talked about on last time, these I can't, and I always, I can't do this, or I'm always going to mess up here, or I can never be this, or I can never achieve this. Some of those negative emotions have been starting to try to creep up and come up, but I'm recognizing where this trigger for this specific emotions, where these triggers are coming from. So they're coming from a moment where right now is already an emotional scenario, right? It's already where I am having this emotional piece where I am missing my uncle, right? But it's also coming because at the same time of me missing him, the other part of the trigger that is coming up is the fear of some other pieces underneath. So the negative emotions are being triggered by the fear of the unknown. The fear of what if I don't do good, or what if this happens, or what if this don't happen? It's the fear of the unknown, right? And so because of this fear of the unknown, I've recognized that some of the negative triggers that have now been trying to come up is based upon this fear that I'm having for something that I'm trying to go after. So we have to start looking at why are these negative emotions coming up? What is happening currently in your life or in that moment that's making this emotion arise? What Because reality is, it's not like you're having negative emotions all day. You're not. You're It's not something that you're just doing throughout the constant day of your life. No, it's specific moments where these things start to come arise. These is specific scenarios when certain things start to happen. So for example, certain situations or people may trigger feelings of anxiety or anger. It's negative emotions, but we have to be able to figure out what is the trigger that's bringing this emotion up. What I explained was a trigger of fear. What your negative emotion might be is this overwhelming feeling of anxiety. I don't want to say that anger per se is a negative emotion, because depending on the scenario and the situation, right? But majority of the time when we're looking at it as being a negative emotion, we still have to be able to realize and see, where did this thing come from? Where triggered, what started this emotion, what made me go into this mode, what made me go into this place of depression. I'm talking more so with this specifically also because with me, I have battled or struggled with this context of depression, right? So there are certain situations that end up happening, certain things that end up happening, certain conversations that I might be in, or it might be a situation where, again, I walk into a certain type of space and it makes me feel a certain type of way. And it takes me into this place of where I feel overwhelmed or where I feel depressed, where I feel very, very low, right? But I have to be able to recognize what triggered it. And this is why, if I don't recognize what triggered the negative emotion, then I cannot fix the negative emotion. I cannot make the adjustment so that when this type of situation happens again, it does not give the same negative response in my emotions. Now I'm prepared for something that happens like that, because now I'm aware of when this thing happens. So if I'm not aware when I'm triggered, then I can still be triggered and situations will always happen, but I'll never be able to fix that scenario. I will always be dealing with that same problem and that same issue. But the reality of where we're trying to develop to go, remember, we have a goal. Remember, we're trying to get to this destined place, this place that we want to see ourselves at, this long-term goal that we're looking at, right? So the place that I'm currently at, I have to be able to recognize the triggers, because I don't want to stay being triggered by the same thing. Or more so, most importantly, I don't want to keep yielding the same emotion, negative emotion. That negative emotion don't feel good. Let's be honest. When I'm feeling depressed, it don't feel good. When I'm feeling sad, it don't feel good. When I'm feeling afraid, that don't feel good. So because I recognize that that don't feel good, I now have the choice, the option to be able to make the adjustments or the change. So again, the way that I do it is I have to first of all recognize what is triggering me. What is the thing that is triggering me? So then when I can start recognizing, excuse me, then when I can be able to start recognizing what is triggering me and how this is being able to deal with bring this up, bring this emotion, this negative emotion up. The next thing I want to start doing is, now I want to start doing this thing called practicing my self-care. Now, I want to start engaging in certain activities or certain things that that then starts to promote or push more of a positive emotion. Again, I'm trying to not be in a negative emotion. So here's the thing, like for example, I remember I was talking with I believe I was talking to my mentor, and he had made this statement in reference to uh because of certain things that I'm doing, and with my new job, and all the other pieces that come with my life. His statement was, he said, Hiram, you're going to have to find a way to be able to deal with the stress. You have to find a positive way to be able to deal with the stress. Now, I know I've probably said this statement before or used this storyline or statement before, but it goes with here. My negative way to be able to deal with my stress in the past was I would eat it away, like literally eat snacks for days. I love cookies. I'm a cook. My mom calls me a cookie monster. My wife calls me cookie monster. So I love sweets, right? I love cookies. Um, And so what I would do is when I would be triggered and I would feel this specific type of emotion, right? I would then snack it away. But that's a negative way to deal with the emotion. So that's the emotion of fear, or the emotion of stress, or the emotion of anxiety, or the emotion of anger. Those are emotions that we do have. That's a part. We all have fearful moments in our lives. We all have moments where we feel like we are being overwhelmed a little bit, where or moments where we're stepping into a new environment, a new space, and we might be a little afraid, a little intimidated by what we're walking into. Those are natural scenarios, right? But it's how we deal with those situations that help us to be able to make these negative emotions and start making the adjustment to make them positives. So we can be able to utilize your stressful moments and do something productive. We can be able to utilize those moments where you feel afraid, or you have fear, and we can be able to take advantage of that moment, right? We can take advantage of that moment, and we can now lean into, why am I afraid? Why does this make me fearful? Why do I feel the way that I feel? Why, when now again, I've recognized the trigger, now because we're still dealing with this emotion, I recognize the trigger that brings this emotion on. But now that I have this emotion that has now arose out of me, arise out of me, now I can lean in and say, why am I feeling this way? Why am I fearful about this opportunity? Why do I feel like I'm not good enough to do this? Why do I feel like this is the way that this is going? Why I ask the question why. So then what I'm doing is, I'm not allowing this emotion that has come, I'm not allowing it to be negative, where it's drawing me down, where it's making me stand still, where it's bringing me into a holding place, where it's making me paralyzed. I'm not allowing it to do that. I'm not allowing it to keep me in the same space that I've been in, or allow me to be able to do something or say something that I cannot take back. I'm not allowing that emotion to make me do that. No, what I'm allowing that emotion to do is push me into learning more about me. I'm allowing it to be able to push me to develop this strength in my emotions. I'm allowing it to be able to do something different. So some of this, and I speak on this part for me, some of the stress and the anxiety that I feel is because I have not properly balanced certain pieces of my life, right? So I can be going through something, and we've talked about this before, just having this context of communication. We communicating with others, communicating about where we are, communicating about how we feel, right? We talked about this before. So in this part of me being able to now have these positive times, what I have learned when I'm learning continually is that, okay, Hiram, the reason why you are stressed is because, one, you're not balancing your life. What does your schedule look like? We're just doing positive conversation. What does your schedule look like? How does your schedule, quote unquote, balance your life out? How does this balance the way that you do? Now, what do I mean by balance? What time are you spending with you? What time are you spending for the job, or for investing in the podcast, or investing in the ministry? Like, how are you allotting your time? What time do you spend with your wife? What time do you spend with your children? Have you allowed yourself to be able to lay out a schedule of what that looks like? Now, every day might not look the same, right? Every day might change. Some days might adjust, but there has to be a time where you are setting, where you are able to pour into you. You're able to spend time with you. When you don't have that time with you, yes, things are going to be overwhelming because you never had a time to breathe. Yes, you're going to be fearful. You're going to be stressed out. Yes, because you've never had a time to take a break. But then when we're talking about this feeling of fear and anxiety of what the future looks like, or what this next thing looks like, or what this room looks like, or whatever that might be for you, we have to be able to look at the other part of this. Why are you so afraid? The reason why you're so afraid is because you might feel like you're underdeveloped, or you might feel like you don't have the knowledge for this room, or you might feel like the people in the room might look at you a certain type of way, or you might feel like you cannot build these type of things, certain type of things, or whatever, right? But a lot of the fear is internal. A lot of this is internal. So in the same context, when do you have time? When do you take time to be able to say, you know what? Okay, I do feel a little intimidated. I do feel fearful that I'm gonna be standing in front of people that are that could be fathers and could be, my big brothers, and they're a little bit higher, and I do feel a little intimidated about that. So instead of me just leaning or staying in that context of fear, what if I spend some time to develop myself? What if I spend some time to study, to make sure to go over and beyond in this moment now? Because you already feel afraid. You feel afraid. You feel like you are not good enough to do this. You feel like you are not prepared enough to be able to walk into this room. You feel like you might not have enough life in you, life experience, to be able to have these certain type of conversations. That might be how you're feeling. So what if in that time that you spend by yourself, what if you set some time to just study, to develop yourself, to strengthen yourself? So what am I doing? I'm having now self-care. I'm taking care of me. I've allowed the triggers to be able to show me or reveal the area. The trigger is going to reveal the area automatically. A moment is going to reveal where you are emotionally. When the moment reveals where you are, you don't have to stay where you are. You can use where this emotion is as a positive. I'm gonna just take care of me now. I see what that is. I recognize what that is. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put some work in, or I'm gonna make some adjustments to my schedule, or I'm gonna do this better, or I'm gonna change this here. So we have to be able to take some time to now take those negative emotions and convert them into positives by allowing your emotions to teach you where you are. Now, how do I change it? Because once I recognize where I am emotionally because of what triggered me, I don't have to again stay in the negative. I use that as a learning platform. So now that I'm using this as a learning platform, I can now start to develop and strengthen in those areas. So then when something happens that used to happen before, I don't be triggered. I'm not triggered by that like that anymore. Why? Because the thing that emotion used to live off of is not like that anymore. It's strengthened. Is I've recognized it. I've strengthened that thing. I've made some adjustments for that thing. So now I'm developing in these areas so that now I don't have to stay in this place emotionally like I was before. So what am I doing? I'm changing my system, this emotional system, because now as I'm changing this system, I'm working the emotions and I'm working the thought process together. Now, let's go back to the definition so we can recognize this again. Remember, it says emotions can influence our thoughts, and our thoughts can influence our emotions. So when I recognize the triggers and then I start to be able to practice self care by taking what the negative emotion that reveals itself and using that as a teaching, and then being able to teach myself and strengthen myself and do some pragmatics, like make adjustments to my schedule, like take some time where I'm developing me, where like taking some time to make sure that I'm spending time with my family, like taking some time and exercising, like taking some time and reading a book and looking at and reading a book to be able to develop myself mentally so I can be able to be strong in these areas. All of these things are now changing this system that we're talking about. So here's this last point that I want to be able to lean into. But before I get there, I want to read this. I'm going to read this statement. that I took some notes, so I just want to read this statement. When we're talking about dealing with or managing or dealing with this negative emotion and using this context of self-care or practicing self-care because of what we recognize, this can involve engaging in activities that bring you joy. Some people are sports people. Some people like to listen to music. Some people like to read books. What things do you enjoy to do? Now, the things that you enjoy to do, this is what I would recommend, is you take that and put it in your self time. Set out some time. It don't even have to be an all day thing. It can be a set time where you do what you like to do. Now, being honest, some days I like to play my son's PlayStation. Now, sometimes I just like playing a game. So sometimes when I don't want to say I'm stressed out, but sometimes when I just got a lot going on, and or it's one of those days where I've had to read or deal with a lot of information, and I want to do something that I enjoy to do, that is not stressful, that is not mentally taxing. I just go play a game, go play a video game. Sometimes I do that with my son. Play, he loves soccer, so I've been playing a soccer game with him, and we've played a football game together. Just doing things that I enjoy. I enjoy listening to music. Now, I also enjoy listening to preachers. I enjoy reading. I It's certain things that I do enjoy. So I have to set time to be able to do the things that I enjoy. But this is a part of your schedule. This shouldn't be like a gift for you at the end of the week. After you went through a whole week, here's your gift. No, it shouldn't be that. Literally, it shouldn't be. You should be able to at least try or attempt to set some personal time where it's not personal time when you're doing work, where it's not personal time where you're building some activity. No, it's just personal time where you're doing something that you enjoy to do, something that relaxes you, something that pours back into you. And then, yes, have time for your work, have time for the things that you're trying to develop, and have time for your family, have time for your friends. Yes, put some times in there for yourself and lay this out for yourself. But you should have a moment and some time where you're doing something for you. And I can tell you honestly, when I do not take the time to make sure that I am adding in my self-care, I can feel it. I not physically, emotionally. Emotionally, I can feel it, because what's happening is, as we're talking about this system, what's happening is the system that I'm fighting against is saying, "Yep, we got another day of win." Like, hey, he didn't do nothing today. He didn't pour it, so we was able to take advantage of 2 days of nothing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's a system that I'm fighting against within my internally, and I can feel when I am emotionally out of balance because I have not taken the time to do some self care. Okay, so here's the last thing that I want us to be able to focus on and look at before we close is I want you to be able to look at some ways that you can be able to some coping strategies, some things that you can be able to develop to have some coping strategies. Now, for some people, it's journaling. For me, one of the things that I have found as a way that helps me with the dealing with these negative emotions, other than just creating the balance of my schedule, is talking to a therapist. That has been a help for me. But some people don't want to do that. So some people, a journaling, writing down how you feel, writing down where you are in the moment. That is a way that you're able to deal or cope with the negative emotions that comes up. I'm dealing with this conversation because, again, we're trying to change the system that we have been living in for some time. We're trying to create a new form of system, but the way that we have to do this, again, is we have to, which is these points, we got to recognize the triggers. We have to be able to start practicing some self-care, but we also have to be able to take some time and a moment of how to be able to develop the coping strategies to be able to deal with these negative emotions. We have to be able to have a way in all of this stuff where you can get off that negative emotion. You can get it out of your system. You can talk it out. You can write it out. Some people, one of the things that me and my son was talking about this, my youngest, and we was having this conversation, and I was talking to him about this negative emotion context. And what I asked him was, I said, which one would you rather do? Would you rather write it out, like write it in a journal? And say, you can be able to write down how you're feeling in the moment. Yes, we're going to have conversations because that's the way that me and my wife are working and developing the relationships that we have with our sons. We want it to be where they can feel comfortable speaking to us about where they are and about what's going on and about the struggles that they have. We want to make this house a safe space for them to be able to do that. So yes, you'll have that. But is it better for you to be able to either write it down in journaling, or because my son loves to be able to video, um, would it be better for you to just set your phone up and talk it out? Talk it out to yourself. Create a space where you can be able to just take your phone, set it up, press record, and have a conversation. You can say it however you choose to say it, whatever you need to say, however you currently feel. If you feel that in the moment while you're talking you need to cry, you can cry it out. Whatever that is, you have the open space to be able to do it, but you have to be able to develop a way that you can be able to get this negative part out of you. You have to be able to get a way where you can be able to have the conversation. You have to have a way where you can be able to write these thought processes down, get it out of this mind, because a lot of the stuff that's racing in your mind is based upon the emotion that is trying to arise. And when we start to communicate these things or write these things down, what ends up happening is it helps us to flush it out. It helps us to get it out of our thought process. And then some of the other things is we start finding or seeing answers, and we can be able to see clearer because we're getting this, we're dumping our mind out. We're dumping these negative thoughts and negative emotions out so that we can then start thinking clearly. Some people, depending on what you do, some people like can do different things like breathing techniques where they do deep breaths, and it gives them a moment of being able to get calm and allows them to get into a space where they can be able to be peaceful, so that then they can be able to have focus, because this is what this is for. I want you to have focus. But our emotions are this negative emotion that arises within us. We need to be able to know how to navigate this. How do you manage these negative emotions? And so the way that we're talking about tonight, that we are able to start managing these things, is we have to then recognize, where is this? What is this trigger? What is triggering me? What is triggering this negative emotion? Then we have to be able to say, now that I know what the trigger is, and now that I know why I'm feeling, what this negative emotion is, now I can use that negative emotion as a teaching place for me, a place that I can be able to learn from, a place where I can be able to develop from and develop certain pieces within me right? Then I have to be able to start practicing self-care, putting some things in place so that I can be able to have a space for myself where I can pour in. I can have a space where I am, developing myself mentally, where I can have a space where I am being able to spend proper time with my family and with my friends. These are all pieces that we can start to develop that helps us in this managing of our emotions. But then the last thing is we have to create a strategy that where we can be able to start dealing with or developing a coping strategy. How do you deal with it when you feel overwhelmed? What is the initial thing that you need to be doing? How do you actually take the time to learn from it? Do you learn from it just by sitting there and thinking about the moment? Sometimes that don't work for everybody. Sometimes that by itself takes you down a deeper hole. I know that does for me. When I get in sometimes into these negative funks in my mind because of the negative emotions that's coming up because of something that has triggered me, I can't sit in it and be thinking about it because it'll take me into a deep hole because my imagination will go wild. I'm a visionary, so I see stuff and I can go into all these different places. So I have to be able to figure out a way. How do you cope with this? What strategy do you put in place that helps you deal with the negative emotions? Yes, do we want to learn from it? We do. How do you learn from it? Is your way of learning going to be you writing it down? You journaling? This is how I felt in the moment. This is exactly what happened. And this is what I can be. This is what I see based upon how I'm feeling. I see that the base reason is because of X, because I'm afraid of this, or because this was just too much, or because this person did this and it made me angry. Now I'm giving clarity to why this triggered me. And now I can be able to say, this is what I learned from that. But that all came out of a coping, that came out of me journaling and writing this thing down. Or me being able to have my therapist where I can go and say, hey, look, this is where I'm at. This is some scenarios that has happened. This is why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. What do how do I get out? And allowing me to be able to learn through this conversation, through the wisdom and the insight that she's giving unto me, through the tools that I'm getting because of that. I'm able to learn from that. So I'm able to now learn from these pieces, gather from these pieces that we're talking about tonight. Now I know how to manage my negative emotions, which then helps me to start changing and adjusting this system in my emotions. So I know and I hope that this has helped you when we're dealing with this, because again, we can all be developing and we're growing and we're changing and we have a goal that we're going after, but we have to be able to know, how do you deal with negative emotions? How do you deal with these pieces so that you can be able to develop and be stronger in these areas and have a positive emotions, have the emotion that you want, the strength in your emotional place of your life, so that you can be able to be productive and move forward. Because again, our emotions, the system in our emotions, is what influences our thoughts. And our thoughts sometimes also influence our emotions. And we want to make sure that we are adjusting both of those systems. So when those systems start talking to each other, they're talking in the direction that we want them to go. I love you all. And as always, it's an honor to be able to talk with you, and always an honor to be able to be with you here tonight. I love you all. And I'll see you the next time right here on the Focus on Greatness podcast. Talk to you next time. Bye bye.